In this eye-opening video, we're going to delve into the surprising facts behind the U.S. government's staggering $1.6 billion that's being funded and going to be allocated towards anti-China propaganda. Discover with me the underlying motives and the potential implications of this unprecedented financial commitment by the U.S. How will this funding shape public perception, influencing media narratives, and impacting U.S. and China relations? Join me in this video to break down the facts and reveal what this means for the future of international diplomacy and global politics. By the end of this video, you will know exactly how you feel about America's $1.6 billion being allocated to this. And you're going to know my opinion on where I believe the money is better spent for the American people. So sit back, enjoy this video. There's going to be a lot of surprises. Let's go. So since a lot of this video is going to touch on propaganda, let's just quickly highlight what propaganda is. It's basically the dissemination of information that could be factual, be arguments, have rumors, half-truths, and lies for the purpose to influence public opinion. This is often done through mass media and education. Today, I'm diving into the surprising facts behind the U.S. government's $1.6 billion funding for anti-China propaganda. And I challenge myself to uncover some truth behind the massive budget. The $1.6 billion, and that's massive spend, is about twice the amount of CNN's budget annually. The bill basically allows $325 million to be spent yearly through 2027 for anti-China propaganda. The bill was introduced back in the House of Representatives in the U.S. back in February of 2023. The bill authorizes activities to counter the malign influence of China. The Senate and the House of Representatives passed this bill in September of 2024. The $1.6 billion bill is aimed at countering China's influence by funding anti-China information campaigns around the world. The funding is intended to shape negative perception about China, primarily through media and education initiatives around the world, which some critics argue is a form of propaganda. Let's call it like it is. It is propaganda. The initiative is seen as a part of a broader U.S. strategy to push back against China's growing global influence, particularly in Africa and Latin America. Critics argue that this funding basically fuels propaganda efforts against China. Isn't this really highlighting double standards in the U.S.'s approach to foreign information operations, especially when other actions are done by other countries and the U.S. basically condemns it? This initiative basically reflects the growing concern in Washington about the global rise and positive influence China has, particularly in developing countries. The bill raises concerns among those who see this as fueling unnecessary hostility, Some argue that this effort could further escalate tensions and promote a more aggressive foreign policy stance towards China, potentially worsening diplomatic relations. The bill that recently passed is known as Countering the PRC Malign Influence Fund, H.R. 1157, passed with bipartisan support and will allocate funds to the State Department over several years. The bill's goal is to counter the Chinese government's influence, basically discrediting them, especially around the China's Belt and Road Initiative and other global projects. While China continues to build partnerships through economic cooperations, the U.S. approach seems to be focused on discrediting these efforts, rather than providing tangible alternatives by the U.S. or even supporting. The concept of government-funded propaganda is nothing new. But the sheer scale of the U.S. government's investment in spreading anti-China narratives is unprecedented. With $1.6 billion now approved, it's crucial to examine the implications of this massive funding and what it means to our understanding for international affairs. The bill, by the way, H.R. 1157, can be found easily on the internet. The $1.6 billion that's going to be going directly to the State Department will be used to subsidize media, civil society around the world. In other words, the U.S. State Department is paying off the media to print what they want, with the intention it must be discrediting China with, let's be honest, fake news. When we think about government-funded propaganda, our minds often jump to why. What's the real purpose? And for Americans, it's usually thinking, what did I do? Why is somebody talking about America? Well, America is one of the big abusers of propaganda throughout the world. Many Americans instantly think about propaganda and point towards Russia and China as the countries who continually resort to propaganda. Well, guess what? Democratic countries, governments, also do propaganda. The United States is guilty of using propaganda to sway public opinion. With this funding, the U.S. is basically buying to influence the narrative and sway people to their opinion. My thought is misinformation. Who's to say that this information that's being put out to the world is accurate, unbiased? What's in the best interests of the American people with this anti-propaganda bill? Since the U.S. government is resorting to propaganda, they're basically admitting they can't win the argument on merit alone. Instead, they're trying to manipulate public opinion to suit their agenda. This is a problem because it undermines the trust of the institution, it erodes the foundation of democracy, and it discredits the American people. This fund, this bill, whatever you want to call it, there's going to be questions about accountability. Who's going to be accountable to assure the information is being sent out into the world is accurate with facts, unbiased facts? Misinformation can cause a lot of trouble. It's basically lies. There's critical questions that need to be answered about accountability in this bill. These questions need to be answered about accountability. It's a lot of money that's going to be spent to discredit a country. The end game of what the U.S. wants to do with this bill is to discredit the country and the people of China. The specifics around this funding and where it's going to be allocated is just as disturbing. The U.S. government has a long history of funding propaganda efforts through various channels. From think tanks to media outlets, these organizations often present themselves as independent and unbiased. But in reality, they're receiving millions of dollars in funding from the U.S. government to spread lies, exaggerations, and spin stories that are simply not true. Let's take an example. The National Endowment of Democracy, which has received millions of dollars in funding from the U.S. over the years. On the surface, this organization appears to be promoting democracy and human rights around the world. But a closer examination reveals that it's involved in some shady activities, from funding opposition groups in countries to supporting regime changes in countries. Doesn't seem good to me. What's really troubling about this bill, it seems to be a double standard. To spend $1.6 billion in anti-China propaganda, the U.S. usually does not condone this. They're usually always speaking up about this, about other countries. But now they're openly talking about a fund that's basically propaganda-driven. Critics point out that the U.S. is going to be on a higher moral ground with this funding. Well, time will tell. I'm not sure how you guys feel, but by pouring millions of dollars into media and information campaigns, doesn't the U.S. people or Washington risk eroding what little credibility they have in the world? Is this bill, is this strategy going to backfire on the U.S. or succeed? Only time can tell. I don't know after this if the U.S. can be trusted, especially if the propaganda is nothing but a bunch of lies. Just to quickly recap a couple of key points, it's essential to recognize the significance of understanding government influence on public perception and international affairs. The U.S. government's $1.6 billion funding for anti-China propaganda has far-reaching implications, and it's crucial to examine this funding. It's crucial that, again, I'm going to say it, somebody's got to be accountable for any misinformation. There's got to be accountability. There's got to be transparency when there are lies. The only conclusion that I draw from this is that the American government is on panic overdrive due to the perceived threat by China. The U.S. dominates the world by threat of war. Let's call it like it is. China, on the other hand, is doing a lot of good around the world. Just to name a few, China is the leader in new energy technologies and has helped countries like Kenya and South Africa develop their clean energy industries. China has helped developing countries reduce poverty by aiding rural public facilities, agriculture, technology transfers. China has provided humanitarian assistance in the form of emergency supply relief, cash transfers in times of need, medical rescue teams, and more. China's economy is an important source of global demand around the world. China shares their fresh river water, yes, fresh river water, with many countries around the world. China continues to make large investments and loans to countries like Africa to help support the development of their infrastructure and advance those countries. China's Belt and Road Initiative is an ambitious infrastructure project that aims to support economic growth in over 150 countries. And stay tuned, I got a video on that here shortly. The offer by China is for world peace. And is that the opposite of the U.S., who quite frankly wants to just have world supremacy through war? China's growth in the world as a leader has come without one missile being launched, without one bullet being fired. Think about that. Think about that. No wars. That's amazing. And what this country has accomplished on a global stage without threats. It's a peaceful country. And there's a propaganda bill from the United States that wants to tear all this down. In the end, this bill that I question and the American people should question, well, it's not focusing on global leadership. It's merely trying to tear down others. As the world watches, we'll see what the consequences are in the years to come. What do you think about the U.S. government's funding for anti-China propaganda? Make sure you comment below. I really want to read your comments. What do you think about $1.6 billion? $1.6 billion to basically tear down the country and the people. Besides everything that I just said, how would you spend $1.6 billion if you were running a country? I know how I would spend it. To start with, the $1.6 billion should be spent at home, not given to the mass media to disseminate lies, misinformation, exaggerations. I would spend it at home. Well, I could tell you a little bit about how I would spend it in no particular order. I would invest in the roads, bridges, rails, ports, airports, transit system. I would tackle the homeless problem, the drug problem, the education problem. I would get the less fortunate off of welfare by providing better training programs, better care for the mentally ill, better assistance for the veterans, and address the immigration problems at the border. Now, $1.6 billion wouldn't fix all of that, but it's a start. Basically, in my opinion, the $1.6 billion of American taxpayers' money can be spent more wisely than on anti-China propaganda. So there you have it. Let me know in the comments below what you think about this outrageous bill. Like I said in the title, on the thumbnail, out of control. $1.6 billion to be spent on anti-China propaganda. So do me a favor, comment below. This is going to be a good one. I want to know your opinion. I'll respect it. I'll read them all. And do me a favor, don't forget to subscribe and like. I really appreciate it. I'm growing this channel with you, and your support is greatly appreciative. Have a great day. Take care.
I am diving into one of the most significant global undertakings of our time, China's Belt and Road Initiative, or BRI. So, what exactly is the Belt and Road Initiative? In simple terms, it's a colossal infrastructure and economic development project was launched in 2013 by China. Its goal, to enhance global trade and stimulate economic growth in 150 countries across Asia, Europe, and Africa. Imagine a 21st century Silk Road, but on steroids. The initiative comprises two main components: the Belt, which refers to the overland routes, and the Road, which is actually a network of sea routes. Why is this such a big deal? Well, for starters, the scale is massive. We're talking about investments totaling over $1 trillion. That's a huge financial commitment, and it has far-reaching implications. First, it creates new trade routes. By improving infrastructure like roads, railways, and ports, goods can move quicker and the cost will be reduced between countries. This is a game changer for global trade dynamics. Second, it fosters economic development in participating countries. Many of these nations desperately need infrastructure upgrades, and the Belt and Road Initiative will provide the funding and expertise to make it happen. This can lead to job creation, improved access to markets, and overall economic growth, and will help bring some countries out of poverty. What does China's Belt and Road Initiative mean for the future? It will be reshaping global trade and economic relationships significantly. For business professionals, understanding this initiative is crucial. It opens up new opportunities and challenges that can have a profound impact on your strategy and operations. In conclusion, China's Belt and Road Initiative is more than just an infrastructure project. It's a bold move that's changing the economic landscape of our world. Whether you're a business leader, an investor, or just someone interested in global affairs, it's something worth keeping an eye on. The Belt and Road Initiative is a game changer for the betterment of the world.